In the shadows of Chicago's Washington Park, a horrifying discovery would shake a community to its core. A young mother-to-be, just weeks away from welcoming her first child, vanished after a routine shopping trip. When firefighters responded to a burning dumpster, they had no idea they'd uncover a crime so heinous it would haunt the city for years. As investigators pieced together the final hours of 21-year-old Theresa Bunn's life, they uncovered a pattern suggesting something far more sinister than an isolated murder. A predator who had been hunting in plain sight, leaving grieving families and a community demanding answers. Before we dive deeper into Theresa Bunn's heartbreaking case, I want to welcome you to X by X Confidential, where we shed light on the stories that need to be told. These stories reach those who might have information to solve these crimes. Now let's continue with Theresa's story, a young mother-to-be whose life was cruelly cut short.
Section 1. In November 2007, a case emerged that would shock Chicago's South Side community. 21-year-old Theresa Bunn, 8 months pregnant with her first child, disappeared after what was reported to be a routine shopping trip. Theresa lived in an apartment on Chicago's South Side. According to family statements, she had already named her unborn son Michael Pierre Terry Bunn, choosing to honor her 14-year-old brother with the name. Family members later told authorities that Theresa had been excited about becoming a mother and had prepared a nursery in anticipation of her child's birth. On November 12, 2007, firefighters responded to reports of a burning dumpster near Washington Park. After extinguishing the flames, they discovered human remains inside. The body was burned so severely that dental records were required for identification. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office later confirmed the remains belonged to Theresa Bunn. The autopsy revealed that Theresa had been strangled before her body was set on fire. The medical examiner classified her death as a homicide. Detective Marcus Johnson was assigned to lead the investigation, which began with a detailed examination of the crime scene. The area around the dumpster was cordoned off as evidence technicians placed markers and collected samples. Investigators canvassed the surrounding neighborhood, seeking potential witnesses. The fire had destroyed significant evidence, creating immediate challenges for the forensic team. Theresa's family, upon learning of her death, was devastated. Rather than holding a traditional funeral, they organized a vigil at the location where her body was discovered. The decision was influenced by the condition of Theresa's remains. As detectives began piecing together the timeline of Theresa's final day, they faced a critical challenge, determining how a visibly pregnant woman could disappear without witnesses. The investigation had only just begun, but would soon take on greater complexity and urgency. Section 2. In the days following the discovery of Theresa Bunn's body, the police investigation intensified. Family members gathered at Washington Park for a vigil, with Theresa's father, Anthony McCrae, addressing the mourners. According to media reports and police statements, Theresa's last confirmed sighting was captured on security footage from a corner store near 51st Street. The video showed her purchasing a bottle of water at approximately 4:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared. After this point, there was no verified information about her movements. The investigation took a disturbing turn when, just one day after Theresa's body was discovered, another woman's remains were found in strikingly similar circumstances: strangled, burned, and left in a dumpster less than a mile from where Theresa had been found. This discovery prompted detectives to consider the possibility that the crimes were connected. Detective Johnson and the investigating team operated on the theory that these were targeted attacks rather than random violence. The similar method of murder and disposal of the body suggested either a single perpetrator or a deliberate copycat. The proximity of the locations and the short time frame between discoveries raised serious concerns about a potential serial offender. The community response was immediate. Local residents reported being fearful, especially women who lived or worked in the area. Business owners near where Theresa was last seen told reporters that the neighborhood generally kept to itself, which complicated efforts to gather witness statements. Anthony McCrae made public statements at the vigil expressing his determination to see justice for his daughter. Hundreds of candles illuminated the site as family members displayed photos of Theresa, including some showing her during her pregnancy. The vigil concluded with prayers and calls for anyone with information to come forward. Section 3. The connection between Theresa Bunn's murder and the second body, discovered a day later, prompted the Chicago Police Department to expand the investigation. Captain Renee Martinez announced at a press conference that additional resources were being allocated to the case, including reaching out to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit for assistance. The investigation room at police headquarters displayed maps of the Washington Park area with pins marking the locations where the bodies were found and where victims were last seen. FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Sarah Klein brought in to consult on the case, suggested that the geographic concentration of the crimes indicated the perpetrator was familiar with the area, possibly living or working there. DNA samples recovered from both crime scenes were expedited to the lab, but preliminary results were disappointing. According to the forensic report, the fire had significantly damaged biological evidence. What samples remained were processed, but no matches were found in existing criminal databases. Detectives continued canvassing the neighborhood, collecting security footage from businesses near where Theresa was last seen. However, the quality of the video is often poor, making identification of potential suspects difficult. Despite interviewing dozens of people, investigators struggled to find witnesses who had seen anything suspicious. The community's fear was evident in the weeks following the murders. Media reports documented women expressing concerns about going out alone. Neighborhood watch groups formed spontaneously, and community organizations distributed safety information throughout the South Side. Veteran officers noted parallels to other serial killer cases, where vulnerable victims were targeted, raising concerns that there might be additional victims who had not been connected to the pattern. The possibility that a serial predator was operating in the area created a sense of urgency among law enforcement and anxiety within the community. Section 4. 3 weeks into the investigation of Theresa Bunn's murder, the case faced significant challenges. Despite extensive efforts, including laboratory analysis of recovered evidence, investigators had not identified a suspect. Forensic technicians continued examining what physical evidence had survived the fire. Using specialized lighting and enhancement techniques, they searched for trace evidence on fragments of clothing found with Theresa's body. However, the extensive fire damage had compromised much of the biological material. In the Southside community, tensions built as residents expressed frustration with the pace of the investigation. Community activists organized daily gatherings near where Theresa had lived. They voiced concerns that cases involving victims from their neighborhood did not receive the same attention as those from more affluent areas. Detectives conducted follow-up interviews with Theresa's friends, seeking any information that might have been overlooked initially. During these interviews, one friend mentioned that Theresa had recently spoken about meeting someone new, though she had been private about the relationship. This information prompted investigators to examine Theresa's phone records and social media accounts more closely. The investigation team created a detailed timeline of Theresa's final weeks, mapping her movements, contacts, and activities. Captain Martinez explained that this comprehensive approach might reveal patterns or connections that were not immediately apparent. As part of the expanded investigation, officers interviewed people living in homeless encampments near Washington Park. One individual reported seeing a dark sedan parked in an unusual location on the night Theresa disappeared. While the description was vague, it represented a potential lead in a case where solid evidence was scarce. As winter approached Chicago, the investigation continued despite diminishing returns. Detective Johnson maintained that the case remained active, emphasizing that Theresa's family deserved answers and her unborn child deserved justice. Section 5. 6 months after Theresa Bunn's murder, the investigation entered a new phase. Her family maintained a memorial in their home, displaying photographs of Theresa throughout her life, including recent images showing her during her pregnancy. Anthony McCrae, Theresa's father, established a foundation in his daughter's name. The organization focused on raising awareness about violence against women and advocating for greater resources to solve cold cases in underserved communities. The family distributed flyers announcing a community march in Theresa's memory. At police headquarters, while the active investigation had been scaled back, Detective Johnson continued to pursue leads. He identified 3 more cases with similar characteristics, dating back 2 years before Theresa's murder. Each involved women found strangled, their bodies burned, all within a 5-mile radius of Washington Park. This pattern suggested the perpetrator had been active for a considerable time before Theresa's murder, developing a methodology in evading detection. FBI profiler Dr. Klein's analysis described the suspect as methodical rather than impulsive, selecting victims he believed would not trigger immediate missing persons investigations. The psychological profile indicated someone who could function normally in society, potentially employed, perhaps with family connections, while concealing violent tendencies. Such individuals often maintain extensive facades of normalcy that help them avoid suspicion. Community patrol groups formed in response to the murders continued their activities months after the crimes. Volunteers walked the streets of Washington Park and surrounding neighborhoods each night, creating a visible presence intended to deter violence. In the McCrae home, Theresa's mother preserved the baby clothes she had collected for her grandson. The family spoke of imagining what the child would have looked like and how he would have grown, emphasizing the dual tragedy of losing both Theresa and her unborn son. Section 6. 1 year after Theresa Bunn's murder, the case had become emblematic of broader issues in Chicago's South Side. Her case had become a symbol for all missing and murdered women whose disappearances received limited attention. At police headquarters, Detective Johnson was joined by cold case specialist Detective Maria Vasquez, who brought new technological approaches to the evidence. The department implemented digital mapping software to better visualize connections between similar cases and identify patterns that might have been missed. In the forensic laboratory, DNA samples from Theresa's case underwent re-examination using extraction techniques designed specifically for degraded evidence. Forensic scientist Dr. Kumar explained that while fire destroys much biological material, advances in technology sometimes allowed for recovery of information from samples that previously yielded no results. Final section. Despite advances in forensic science and the persistent efforts of Detectives Johnson and Vasquez, Theresa Bunn's murder remained unsolved. The case had officially been linked to at least 3 other similar murders, confirming the existence of a pattern suggesting a serial predator had been active in Chicago's South Side. The Chicago Police Department maintained that cases like Theresa's were never truly closed, but rather waiting for the right piece of evidence, witness statement, or technological development to provide a breakthrough. Meanwhile, the connections between multiple victims provided no definitive answers, only confirmation that other families shared similar grief. The case of Theresa Bunn, while unsolved, was far from forgotten. Her name continued to be spoken, her story shared, and her memory honored. For her family, for her community, and for all those seeking truth and accountability, the pursuit of justice continued. Though Theresa Bunn's killer had not been identified or brought to justice, her memory endured as a catalyst for change, a symbol of perseverance, and a reminder of the value of every life and the importance of seeking justice regardless of how much time had passed.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through Theresa Bunn's tragic case. Her story, though heartbreaking, deserves to be told. Her family continues to fight for justice, and by sharing this video, you become part of that fight. If you have any information about Theresa's case, please contact the Chicago Police Department. What do you think happened to Theresa? Could the killer still be out there, or has justice simply been delayed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to support our mission to bring attention to cases like Theresa's, please smash that like button, subscribe to X by X Confidential, and hit the notification bell. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, every victim deserves a voice.